let's talk about how a law is made. Now, how does a law get started? Well, it starts with an idea. That idea can come from an everyday citizen, or it could come through a political action committee or a lobby group. Now, political action committees and lobby groups are money organizations that spend money to get direct access to politicians and try to convince them to vote one way or another or to sponsor a piece of legislation one way or the other. Now, there are all kinds of ideas that can be made. Sometimes you need to make something illegal. Sometimes you need to make something legal that was illegal. Sometimes you need to clarify a law that is already on the books and is being used in a way that wasn't intended. And sometimes it involves aid and money and things like that. And sometimes it also involves doing things like setting up the internet or the interstate highway system, or adding new roads to the interstate highway system, or new national parks, or something like that. Now, for this, we are talking federal laws, not state laws. So typically, these laws would apply to things that would benefit the country. They usually only apply at the state level if you are talking about like a big funding bill that would fund small projects across multiple states, or something like doing the interstate highway system, or adding another national park, or something like that, where you are adding something to an existing federal system. But again, how does it start? It starts with an idea. Now, if you're an everyday citizen, how do you get your idea to Congress? Well, you can look up who your member of the House of Representatives is and start with them. You can write, email, call their offices and start there. You could also reach out to your two state senators. Now, Senate positions, they serve the entire state, so you would reach out to whichever one is maybe of your party. If they're both of the same party, maybe you reach out to whichever one you think whose policies line closer to what you want to have done. But again, you can call, email, write a letter, and just tell them you want something to get done. Now, when they have heard this idea, if they like the idea for whatever this law is that we are trying to introduce, it can go a couple of routes. If it is something that needs more immediate attention, sometimes they will write the law or the bill, present it on the chamber of their House of Congress, trying to get it voted on quickly and move it forward on an expedited fashion. Otherwise, sometimes it goes to a committee where they study the effects of the law, they look at it in a little more depth, get better clarification on what's being tried to do, etc., and trying to write out something that works. Once it passes committee or has been brought for a vote on the floor of either chamber, it gets voted on, assuming it has a majority vote in the House of Representatives, or does not get filibustered in the House of or in the Senate, or has enough votes to break the filibuster in the Senate. It can get approved. Now, what is the filibuster in the Senate? The filibuster is basically this rule that says they must have 60 votes to agree to move forward to vote on a bill as to whether or not it would pass. Basically, you can stop any bill from being voted on with a filibuster. Now, the old rules were senators had to speak the entire time they were filibustering a bill, and they had to keep talking and talking and talking and talking until basically they couldn't talk anymore, and they discouraged people from voting on it, or if they were trying to push it out past a deadline or what have you. A famous movie on this is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Now, after it has passed one house or the other, then it goes to the opposite house to be voted on. Now, just because you have submitted an idea to both houses, they may not vote on an exact copy of the bill. So if the House passes something, it goes to the Senate. The Senate may look at it and go, yeah, we need to deal with this, but don't like the language of how it's addressed or the money spent or whatever. If there's a disagreement, they could pass their own version of that bill. And then once both chambers have passed a version of it, it goes through a process called reconciliation. Reconciliation is basically where they go to try to hammer out the differences and make it one coherent bill that is worded exactly the same from both chambers, both the House and the Senate. Once they have worked out those differences, the bill goes back to each house to be revoted on with the changes. And once both chambers have passed the exact copy of the same bill, then it goes on to the president's desk. If the president likes the bill, the president will sign it. If the president does not like the bill, that bill goes back to Congress, and then they can hold an override vote. Now, what is an override vote? Well, when the president vetoes a piece of legislation, it does not become law. So, they can override the president's veto. If the president said, no, I don't want that to become a law, they would have to hold votes in each chamber of Congress, and they would have to get 2/3 of all of the members of both houses to vote yes to pass a bill around the president's veto. And this has happened numerous times in American history. It is not uncommon for bills to get passed around a president. Sometimes it's not that the president doesn't like a bill, is why they vetoed it. Maybe there's some language they don't like in it. And sometimes it is clearly something that he knows is going to be bad for the country, but Congress wants to do anyway. There's all kinds of reasons as to why a bill could be vetoed by a president and passed around it. Now, sometimes what happens is you have one party controlling both the House and the Senate, so they control Congress. The president is of a separate party, and the president will veto a bill because they don't like the fact that it came from their opposition party. That can happen. And if there's enough votes in both chambers of Congress, they can pass it around the president's veto. And then once it is either signed into law by the president or passed around the veto, then usually it becomes law. Now, sometimes it has a specific time frame. Sometimes it says, this bill will take effect on the first day of the following month after it has been passed, or something. Sometimes it's 6 months. It depends on the time frame of the bill and what they are trying to do and how fast it will be implemented. Sometimes it's immediate, especially on spending measures, where they authorize spending money almost immediately after they pass the law. That would go into effect then. Whereas other things may have to take more time, depending on what it is, to allow the agencies involved to begin rolling it out, to get, literature out and get every department that would need to deal with this law up to speed on what the law is going to be. So that is just an overview of what it takes for an idea to become a law. It's pretty simplified. But I'm also going to be doing some other videos about specifically the House and the Senate. I'm going to do them as two separate videos, and they will be up in my Government Answers playlist. A little bit more about how each of them work and what their responsibilities are, etc. That should also help clarify this whole idea of what it takes for something to become a bill at a later point. So, like I said, that just wanted to kind of clarify on what it takes, and it is a slow process to get something to become a bill. Because a lot of people are saying, well, this should happen, just make it happen. Well, it doesn't just happen. It is a slow process, and I just wanted to clarify how that whole process works.